So in this chapter, we see the trio of Yuji, Akotu, and Rika successfully detain Sukuna and hit him with Angel's Curse technique, Jacob's Ladder, in an attempt to free Megumi of Sukuna. However, it's Jujutsu Kaisen and things don't always work out as planned, and everybody might actually die in this chapter, but also Maki shows up at the end finally, and she does something. We'll get into it, of course, but we have a lot to talk about because a lot happens in this chapter. So we're coming in seeing Akotu hitting Sukuna with his own cleave, and we were wondering in the previous chapter, how was Akotu able to copy Sukuna's curse technique? We speculated about it a lot, but it turns out that from Akotu himself, that he was able to learn it from Sukuna's final finger, because he says to Sukuna, like, you couldn't retrieve your final finger, could you? And Sukuna's like, I see. And that's pretty interesting. So we did talk about that in the previous chapter, but I was more so fixated on blood because that seemed to be more applicable to the condition for Akotu to be able to copy curse techniques, but maybe it's flesh too? I don't know. It's still not being explained, and at this point I don't know if it ever will. It seems like Gege likes doing that, unfortunately. But if you're wondering, like, wait, why is there one finger remaining? Well, it's because all of everything that was going on with Kenjaku's plan and getting the fingers for Sukuna and everything, he only managed to get 19 of Sukuna's 20 fingers. So the Sukuna that we have been seeing this whole time has only had 19 fingers. And he speculated that Gojo was in possession of the final finger and was keeping it. And I guess that was true. And I guess during the 1 month time skip before Gojo fought Sukuna, Akotu took the finger and ate it, because Sukuna's like, I see, quite the meal, in reference to Akotu saying that, you couldn't find the last finger, right? So I guess it's flesh consumption or something is the condition. We talked about it before. We saw Rika, like, bite off Uro's arm, back in Sendai Colony battle. And then she, like, ate it or chomped on it or whatever. And that's what Ryu thought was the condition, because he thought back to that when he saw Akotu use Uro's curse technique against him, sky manipulation. So now that it's implied that Akotu ate Sukuna's final finger to get the curse technique, I guess that's it. But also it's like Akotu has Sukuna's final finger inside of him, because, like, he ate it, right? And if you eat it, you're not destroying the finger. Destroying Sukuna's finger, at least it was told by Gojo in the very beginning of the series, that it's nigh impossible to do that. Now we know that you can, I guess, destroy it with Angel's Curse technique, right? Because back in chapter 199, when they were talking about releasing a reincarnated sorcerer from, like, a new sorcerer that they took over, or just a new person in general, she said that, using her curse technique, it's not impossible, but it's extremely likely they will die because the cursed object and the body fuse. So I don't really know what's going on with that. Unless Rika ate it and then she's, like, containing it or something. I just don't think that Akotu or Rika have the means of destroying Sukuna's finger, meaning that there is some tangible aspect of it still existing, and I guess it's with Akotu right now, and this could play into how Sukuna might get out of this. I'm not saying that he is going to take over Akotu, but that would be pretty wild if he does, right? Because considering what happens at the end of this chapter with Sukuna possibly dying, spoiler alert, I mean, you've already read the chapter probably, but I don't know, it just doesn't seem like it's going to be that easy, and maybe he can soul hop to Akotu, like the way that he soul hopped from Yuji to Megumi. Not really sure. Maybe I'm overthinking it, but that finger, it's got to come into play, right? I mean, come on. Hey, real quick, guys, if you could also follow me on TikTok or Instagram, whichever platform you like to use more. I upload TikToks and Reels on there every day. So if you could really support me, I'm trying to get to 10,000 followers on either of the platforms. I really appreciate it, guys. Thank you. But after this, Akotu and Yuji just go at Sukuna, just start beating him down again, hitting him in the mouth, stomach, kneeing him in the face, and Sukuna's just, taking it on the chin, and he winds up cleaving Yuji right in the chest, like the checkerboard pattern. And it's wrecking Yuji, of course, and this normally would probably kill him, I suppose, but Sukuna is so weathered at this point, so gassed, that his cursed energy output isn't what it was, so he's not really able to hit Yuji with, like, the lethal blow that he normally would. He's about 50%, maybe even less than 50% of his cursed energy output at this point from Yuji's hits, hitting the soul, trying to free up Megumi, but also everything that he's been going through, these last 30 chapters. And Yuji winds up spitting blood in his face as a result of this. And it is pretty graphic and gruesome, but it is a part of Yuji's plan. And we'll come back to why he spit this blood in Sukuna's face. But Yuji falls down and he's able to reverse curse technique heal from this cleave that he took right to the chest. And Rika and Akotsu start going at Sukuna again, along with Yuji. And Sukuna's like, all right, I got to do something drastic here. So he decides to possibly let go of his hollow wicker basket because he's been activating this technique with his two bottom hands. Hollow wicker basket is like simple domain that's protecting him from the sure hit of Akotsu's domain that they have currently been in this whole time. And he's going to do this so that he can activate his world-splitting dismantle. That technique that he derived from Maharaga in order to kill Gojo. It's like a dismantle that cuts everything at an atomic level. Like, you pretty much don't come back from it, essentially. But the team has figured out that he's going to do this because they've kind of been waiting for him to do it because it's like Sukuna's trump card at this point. And Akotsu reaches into Sukuna's, mouth stomach and freaking rips his tongue out. Pretty wild sequence. And it's interesting that we're seeing, this one panel of him throwing it on the ground. It's like Gege is, purposely showing us hey, he ripped the tongue out and he threw it on the ground. So it's the tongue gonna come back into play too? Is this another thing I'm overthinking? I don't know. It's just that Sukuna is crafty. You gotta pay attention to what he's doing or what is happening to him. You know what I mean? But Akotsu is ripping out his mouth tongue because he figures that okay, if he wants to use the world cutting dismantle, he probably either has to do chants, say those non sequitur words in order to buff a technique or to activate a technique, which Gege for sure got from Bleach. It works the same exact way in that series. It's never explained why they really have to do that and why those words have some kind of tangible effect on reality and how it affects the sorcery of Jujutsu and the supernatural magic of it and why those words have to be said and why it affects those specific words. It doesn't really matter. They just have to say these things in order to do certain things. And also, hand signs. So it's either he has to do hand signs or do chants or do both in order to do the world cutting dismantle. And we're going to find out that he pretty much just has to do a chant because he does start saying some stuff before he does it at the end of the chapter, and we'll get into that. But Akotsu's gamble paid off here. And that's also why they're grabbing his arms here, just making him essentially defenseless. But Sukuna still has one hand free, and he uses that to hit Akotsu with some cleaves, but, like we were saying, he's still pretty drained, and this isn't enough to kill Akotsu, or even really pierce through him. And Akotsu's like, I can take this. I'll just close the distance taking this on the chin. And as he starts going after Sukuna again, the blood that Yuji spit on Sukuna's face starts bursting. Sukuna's like, what? How's he doing that? And we see Yuji activating it from his hands. So this means that Yuji can do somewhat of a blood manipulation. And it's how can he do this? Because a couple chapters back, we saw off panel, he hits Sukuna with a freaking piercing blood. And at this point, Yuji doesn't have a curse technique, as we know. It's the iconic thing to his character. But somehow, over the time skip, the 1 month time skip before Gojo fought Sukuna, he somehow learned how to do blood manipulation as well. I guess Choso did something with him. Don't really know. Technically, he shouldn't be able to do this, but he can now. Maybe it has something to do with Yuji's ability to swap bodies, swap souls. Maybe he swapped Choso's body and then Choso did something, and then maybe Choso did something to make Yuji's body be able to learn blood manipulation or something. I mean, the curse techniques are tied to the brain essentially, so I don't know if they're tied to the soul as well. That hasn't really been explained, but somehow Yuji could do this. But he's not a master at it, I guess, because he would just be firing off a whole bunch of blood manipulation at this point if he was. But after he hits Sukuna with this, we go into another flashback of that 1 month time skip where Yuji is going over Tsukumo's notes about the soul that she was able to give to Choso before she was killed by Kenjaku. And it basically boils down to Yuji saying that in the book, Tsukumo said that even if souls are mixed together to some degree, such as the case with Sukuna taking over Megumi's body, two souls in one vessel, Sukuna suppressing Megumi's soul, they'll never become one. Like, no matter how much Megumi's soul gets suppressed or deepened or whatever, it won't disappear completely or completely conjoin with Sukuna's, meaning that there's always going to be a chance to save somebody if their soul is being suppressed after being taken over by a reincarnated sorcerer or just another sorcerer with soul manipulation or something like that. But first, let's talk about the sponsor of this video, Fume. Not everything in a bad habit is wrong, so instead of a drastic, uncomfortable change, why not just remove the bad from your habit? Fume is an innovative, award-winning device that does just that. Instead of electronics, Fume is completely natural. Instead of vapor, Fume uses flavored air. And instead of harmful chemicals, Fume uses all natural delicious flavors. Your Fume comes with an adjustable airflow dial and is designed with movable parts and magnets for fidgeting, giving your fingers a lot to do, which is helpful for de-stressing and anxiety while breaking your habit. Fume also has Base now, which was launched in January. It's a weighted stand to rest your Fume on when it's not in use, with a magnet inside that keeps your Fume attached. Guys, I'll be straight up. I particularly do not have a bad habit that I would use Fume for. I mainly wanted to partner with Fume for you guys. That's because my demo is 18 to 34. And statistically, a lot of you probably have some bad habits. And you know what I mean. Some of you are really knee deep in those bad habits, and I would really like to help you guys turn those bad habits into good habits. But that doesn't mean that I'm not going to use it personally. I mean, now that I have it, why wouldn't I? So this thing is genuinely refreshing. Like, it's so much more flavorful than you would think it would be. I tried the crisp mint, and wow, it is just so good. It is a breath of fresh air. And trust me, I know stopping is something we all put off because it's hard, but switching to Fume is easy, enjoyable, and even fun. Fume has served over 150,000 customers and has thousands of success stories. And there's no reason that that can't be you. So join Fume in accelerating humanity's breakup from destructive habits by picking up the Journey Pack today. Head to tryfume.com/Zhoniin or scan the QR code and use code Zhoniin to get 10% off when you get the Journey Pack today. That's tryfum.com and use code Zhoniin to save an additional 10% off on your order today. Thanks, guys. However, there is an exception because Yuji points out that Mahito, because of his curse technique was direct soul manipulation, he was able to merge souls together and create like a separate creature as we saw back in the Shibuya arc. And Yuji's like, as long as that technique doesn't come into play, everything should be cool. So it's safe to assume that two souls can't become one. So him saying I think here and him even bringing up the fact that Mahito could do this makes me wonder, like, why is this being brought up? Is this going to be a thing that comes into play possibly? Can Sukuna merge souls? Because Sukuna can alter his own soul and manipulate it. I mean, that's how he was able to take over Megumi in the first place. Like, he transferred his soul to Yuji's pinky. Not really sure, but this is what Yuji is going to base his strategy off of. He's going to use his cursed energy that he can manipulate somehow to target the barrier between Sukuna's and Megumi's soul. And that's how he's going to wake up Megumi. Then Angel comes in, and this is where her part of the plan comes into play. So she says Angel's technique is the eradication of the target's technique. We should be able to eradicate Sukuna due to the incarnated form being a direct mix of his technique, his personality, and the cursed object. But since the cursed techniques are connected to the brain, the survival rate of the target is low. However, if they're able to separate the two souls and weaken the synchronicity between the cursed object and the body, then the survival rate will skyrocket. So Yuji, like we said, is going to weaken the connection between Megumi's and Sukuna's soul. And then once he does that enough, then they can hit Sukuna with Jacob's ladder, and it would kill Sukuna in theory while keeping Megumi alive. And again, just in theory. And we actually get to this point because they finally detain Sukuna enough where Rika is grabbing his two top arms, Yuji has his other arm. Of course, Sukuna's one arm is still free, but this is enough for Akotsu to finally use Jacob's ladder on him, which, you know, during the time skip, he was able to copy this from Angel. I don't know, maybe he ate a little piece of sashimi from her or something. Hanakurusu's body. And he pierces Sukuna's arm with the blade that is holding Jacob's ladder, and he gets fried by it. Just like he got fried by it before, you know, right after he took over Megumi's body. And this allows Yuji to finally hit Sukuna with like a soul punch or whatever. And he hits him, and this like takes him into the soul world or whatever, wherever Megumi is being held inside of his own soul. Or, you know, it's very similar to like when Yuji and Sukuna would meet each other and talk when Sukuna was still inside of Yuji's body, and he sees Megumi on the ground, and Megumi's like, that's enough. I've had enough. And the narration says, within Fushiguro Megumi's soul, any will to live had already been extinguished. And yeah, he's not getting up, despite Yuji even being there, despite them being able to possibly save him at this moment. Megumi's just given up. Like, he is just done at this point. And to be honest, it's pretty understandable because he's lost a lot. First of all, from the beginning, like, he lost his parents. You know, his mom, who we haven't even really been introduced to yet, probably died. You know, Toji is his freaking dad. We all know what happened with Toji. His sister, the person he loved the most in this world, the person he cared the most about. His whole storyline, his whole motivation in this series was essentially centered around his sister and her survival, right? Sumiki. But it turned out that she wasn't even really anything. She just became Yorozu and killed by himself. Well, you know, Sukuna in his body, but still, he technically killed his own sister and he was forced to watch. And then of course, this whole time, Sukuna has taken over his body and then killed his freaking teacher, his freaking surrogate uncle, and Gojo. Like, he's done. Like, he's been through more than enough trauma at this point. And the whole thing with Sukuna doing the bath and submerging Megumi's soul even more, and also all the damage that happened to Megumi's brain during the Gojo versus Sukuna fight. Like, every time that there was brain damage that happened to Sukuna, it was also happening to Megumi. Especially like when he was hit by Limitless Void, that was hurting Megumi as well. So Megumi is done. And what this is telling me is that I think Megumi is going to be the one that activates the merger between Japan with Tengen. Because Kenjaku made it so that Megumi Fushiguro was given authority to activate the merger. Like, that was the rule that he put in place. And then he gave Tengen, you know, like in his cursed womb state, to Sukuna. And then he like ate it. So at some point, either Sukuna is going to die or separate from Megumi. And then once Megumi is like Megumi again, I'm pretty sure he's going to be like, you know what? I don't care anymore. I'm going to just burn the world at this point because screw it. You know, everything is falling apart. There's nothing left to live for. So why don't I just kill everything? And he just activates the merger, and we finally see that big thing happen. You know, the population of Japan merging with Tengen, becoming that huge merged curse entity that who knows what will happen at that point. I mean, it's a possibility it can create a new method of cursed energy, or it just destroys the world. But it seems like Megumi is somehow inadvertently becoming the final villain, the end-all be-all of Jujutsu Kaisen. That would be pretty wild if that was the case here. Like, I don't think a talk no jutsu power of friendship is really going to save Megumi here, although it's still a possibility. But we come out of that and we come back to the fight between Sukuna, and Sukuna is still here. Despite getting hit by Jacob's ladder, he is not done. And he starts chanting Scale of the Dragon, Recoil, Twin Meteors. Like we said, this is like the chant that he has to do to activate the world-cutting Dismantle. And he just fires it off. And it goes right through Akotsu. Like, almost the same way that it did Gojo. I mean, not as clean at the waist, but it is slicing directly through Akotsu, cutting off his hand that has the ring, by the way, the Rika ring, cutting through his torso entirely. And I'm not really sure if this means that Akotsu is dead, but it seems like he is. Like, I don't think he's coming back from this. Unless he can come back the same way that, I don't know, maybe Gojo might be coming back allegedly, but he is ostensibly being killed by this. And I'm not really that shocked because, you know, like I've been saying, if you fight Sukuna in this final arc and you're not Yuji, you're probably going to die. With little to no exceptions, and I don't think Akotsu is an exception here. Rika is also being hit by this, and Yuji as well. Although Yuji doesn't seem to be getting hit by this as much as Akotsu, but still getting hit nonetheless, and they're all going down. And it seems like, oh, Sukuna has won. It's over. But no, as Akotsu's barrier is breaking down from him being killed, I assume, Maki suddenly appears behind Sukuna and stabs him through the back, through the chest with her soul-splitting katana. And that's where the chapter ends. This is the same way that she killed Cursed Spirit Naoya. Like, the same way. And I guess this could also be a parallel to Toji sneaking up on Gojo. You know, because he did the same thing at the beginning of their fight. And of course, you know, Maki is like the new version of Toji. And what does this mean? So, the soul-splitting katana, you know, as it says, splits the soul, has some kind of soul manipulation to it, and it just eradicated Naoya. So is it going to eradicate Sukuna? Possibly. Also, I forgot to mention, Maki was able to sneak up on Sukuna because she has Heavenly Restriction, which means that she has 0 cursed energy. Like, even regular humans in the Jujutsu Kaisen world have a little bit of cursed energy in them, despite not being sorcerers, but with Heavenly Restriction, you just have 0, and then you just become like a superhuman as a result of it. And because you also have 0, barriers, domain expansions, things like that, you know, picking up on cursed energy, that just doesn't apply to them. So they can just go in and out of barriers, in and out of domain expansions as they please. And that's how she was able to sneak up on Sukuna here with her soul-splitting katana that was made by her sister Mai on her deathbed. So is this going to kill Sukuna? I mean, on paper it should, but when Sukuna's looking back at her, he's like smiling. Like, he doesn't seem to be too worried about this. And like I said, there could be other options. Maybe the tongue comes back into play. I don't know. Maybe the finger that Akotsu may or may not have eaten. Or maybe Sukuna can, like, I don't know, out-manipulate his own soul from this attack from Maki, possibly. Or this is just where Sukuna dies. And then, I don't know, Megumi takes over his body again and then activates the merger, like I said. So many things could be happening here. But let me know what you think about this chapter in the comments, guys. And if you liked the video, please give it a like and please subscribe if you haven't already. Have a great day, and I'll see you in the next one.